Welcome everyone to the first week of lectures for public relations. We are going to address kind of an overview of what PR is to give you an idea of what you'll be looking at this semester. In general, we'll talk about things like some of the challenges, the definition of public relations, and its comparison to jobs such as journalism, advertising, and marketing, among other things. So let's start with what the challenge is of public relations. Now, oftentimes people that go into PR or begin these beginning classes like this, they think of public relations as advertising. But it's not. It is a multifaceted job. So you honestly are going to need skills in a lot of different areas in order to be successful in PR. First and foremost, as with most jobs, I would even venture to say all jobs, all careers, you need to have strong written and interpersonal communication skills. So that's one of the things that you need to look for. Another is the ability to research, and I don't necessarily mean just academic research. I also mean popular research, to find who your client is, what's being said, and how it's being said, and to interpret all of that. In addition to that, you need to be able to negotiate well with clients, with the community, and so on. You need to be creative, handle logistics, be able to facilitate meetings, and so on. So you'll be able to set up certain things to manage all the little pieces that go along with meetings and conferences and so on. And then to deal with problem solving. Because very often what you handle, not for the most part, but in many cases, you're going to handle crises or you're going to handle some issues that come up and you have to be able to problem solve. So these are some of the skills, some of the challenges that PR practitioners face so that they can be as successful as possible. Now, in terms of the global scope of public relations, what does it look like on the global scale? It's honestly an industry that is growing across borders. It's a very large industry that encompasses a lot of different details, from big corporations that are public relations corporations to companies that have their own in-house public relations group. Now, to be perfectly honest, advertising alone, and that's not public relations, but it's a part of public relations, advertising alone is a $450 billion industry. And that was in 2009, so imagine how much that's changed since then. It's more so. But almost $8 billion is spent each year just in the United States. And that's on PR as a whole, not advertising on its own. Expected growth of the industry of public relation in Asia in 5 years, maybe more like 2-3 years even, is somewhere around 23%. So the potential for positions, especially if you are in an Asian culture, is astronomical. And then the annual spending in China alone is 2.2 billion. So you can see it's a pretty broad career with a lot of hands in a lot of places. So it's touched a lot of areas. And as I mentioned before, the definition or the way it's described is oftentimes misinterpreted by a lot of people, so we want to make sure that you fully understand what public relations is. So let's look at this second definition here, just because it's the most local of definitions, by the University of Missouri. It says that public relations is the strategic management of competition and conflict for the benefit of one's own organization. An organization can be not only a company, but it could also be a celebrity, a product, and so on. Also for the mutual benefit of the organization and its various stakeholders or publics. Now, most times people think of PR practitioners or the career of public relations as this manipulative, sort of negative vibe that you get when you think of the word PR. It does not have to be that way. And as a matter of fact, you'll probably be more successful if you are not manipulative. You're going to find yourself in some trouble. So if you look at the last part of the definition, for the mutual benefit of the organization, so your client, and that of your public. So those that are participating in your clients are participating with your clients. So they're purchasing your product or they're following your celebrity or whatever it might be. Your goal is not only to benefit your client, but to benefit the public that connects to your client. All right, so what do you think? What are the key terms that are used in the definitions that frame today's modern PR. If you think of the term modern PR, what does that encompass? What are some of the skills? What are some of the things within that definition that might tell you what is needed to be a modern practitioner in public relations? Now let's look at a couple of the key terms that are used in your textbook and that are used pretty regularly across the board. Public relations is deliberate, so it's purposeful. Usually things are not done on accident. It's planned, sometimes planned in advance, sometimes planned as you manipulate through and move through a conflict. It is, in some cases, a performance. So there are things that have to be done on, quote, stage. So that might include things like advertising or for some kind of speech that an audience member, or excuse me, some kind of speech that your client is giving, and so on. It's for the public interest. It involves two-way communication. Oftentimes people think of PR as me presenting an image to the audience. But to be perfectly honest, it's two-way communication. Not only are you presenting information to your audience, but your audience is responding and you are receiving that feedback and making adjustments to that image portrayal based on the feedback. And in addition, it's a strategic management of competition and conflict. So you are constantly following what the competition is doing. Coke is following Pepsi, and so on. Apple is following Android, and so on, or back and forth. So there is a strategic management of what your competition is doing and how they handle conflict and how you handle conflict. Now, oftentimes when you look at, and you're not going to look at a lot of textbooks unless you go into this field, but you might see the term RACE as an acronym used in some of the public relations textbooks as well as by some of the practitioners. And it stands for research, action, communication, and evaluation. And what do we mean by research? What we mean is that when we look at public relations as a whole, as a process, we start with research. We look at the problem or the situation. What is the current situation of my client, or what problem is my client facing? So we start with research. After the research, we follow that to action, which is like program planning. What is going to be done about this problem? What needs to happen? And then we go to communication, which is the execution of that plan. How will the public be told, or what will you present to the public that will help them to see the solution to this problem? And then finally you wrap around to evaluation. And that is what was the audience reached, and what was the effect of that problem that you addressed. So you addressed a problem, you managed it, you took action and executed it. What was the result of that? Was it effective, ineffective, and so on? And there's a lot of different ways in which it can be ineffective. I'm sure you've seen that happen before, where a celebrity or a politician or a company will react to a issue in a poor manner, and therefore the reaction or the evaluation of what they did shows that it was a negative result. All right, so there's a couple other things we want to briefly address here. Some of the components of public relations, and I'm going to leave this up for you just to look at here, but you can also get it in the PDF version of the PowerPoint. But these are some of the different areas in which you find yourself in PR. So you can find yourself experiencing either all of these things or being a focused person on one area. It depends on where you are working. So what do you think? How do social media offer other opportunities and obstacles for public relation practitioners, since that is the most current thing? That's the biggest deal right now. And if you look at my overview of the interview that I did with a variety of practitioners that is on Blackboard, you'll notice that this is pretty much a common theme. How does social media offer opportunities and also problems for the public relations practitioner? I mean, it's a free resource, but with that free resource, there are many issues that can surface. Now let's look at the difference between different career paths that are often associated with public relations and public relations as a whole. Starting first with journalists versus PR professionals. Now, journalism is probably the most fundamental tool or ability that you can have when going into PR, at least right now. That could definitely change. But journalism is often a starting place for many folks. Not always. Some start in advertising, some start just with basic skills and kind of work their way up. But journalism is very much a starting place, and it's great to know the field of journalism because public relations professionals often work with journalists or try to work with journalists. So there's a need to create that relationship, and understanding them is the most valuable tool you can have. So journalists are different in that they use only two basic components, media relations and writing, in their career. They are typically objective observers, where they are not putting their opinions in on things. Some article writers are different, and that's their job. But for the most part, journalists report facts. They focus on a very large audience. It doesn't matter what that audience's interests are, they are focusing on a large audience. And they typically only use one channel. Now granted, that channel is starting to progress a little bit, where even though there are rarely papers anymore, the journalist that would have written for a paper would also be writing in blog format and so on. Now, PR professional does things a little differently. They advocate for one side instead of being objective. So they're not objective, and they use a lot of different tools. And they really focus in on one group of people, their desired public. So you can see the differences, although there are quite a few similarities. The same thing exists in advertising versus public relations, where advertising works through mass media and has that big external audience. It is different from PR in that we are looking to rely on a variety of communication tools, not just, say, print advertising or television advertising or radio or so on. They're looking at a number of different avenues and also focus in on a very specific audience, and sometimes even much more specific than that of an advertiser. It's also quite a bit broad in scope and can be a support tool rather than just an advocator. So advertising advocates a group, whereas PR often reacts to conflict and reacts to crises, where advertising doesn't often do that as a focus. And in addition, it creates a favorable environment for an organization's survival, not just for, say, a product, but for the whole organization. So how can PR activities, things that public relation practitioners do, fulfill marketing objectives? So when we say marketing, we mean things like advertising. How can PR be a part of advertising in an effective way? So let's look at some of the ways that public relations support marketing. There are 8 general ways that public relations support marketing. 1, it develops new prospects, provides third-party endorsements, it generates sales leads, and so on down the line. They stretch dollars, they establish credibility, they do all of these things in order to be as effective as possible for their corporation or their celebrity or so on. So they do a lot of different things that support marketing as a whole. In addition, marketing and public relations are a little different. So even though they do support marketing, they are slightly different than marketing. So marketing is concerned with customers and selling products or services, very similar to advertising, which, by the way, is why we kind of use those terms interchangeably in a lot of cases. Many times people will use marketing and advertising interchangeably because they both sell products. But they also deal with target markets, consumers, and customers. So it's a little bit more involved than, say, just your outsourced advertiser might be. Whereas public relations is concerned with building relationships as opposed to just selling products. They're selling image, which in order to sell a perception or to sell an image, you have to form relationships and generate goodwill. So that's kind of a common practice in public relations. And also public relations deals with big publics, big audiences, and even stakeholders. It's not just about selling one product to one group of people. It's a lot more than that. It's very intricate and very, very broad. In addition, Let's look at our final piece here, and that is the integrated perspective or the communication that is involved in all of these processes. So we just looked at marketing and journalism and advertising and how social media is used in all of these things. How is strategic communication a part of public relations? Now, there's this big concept of integration, so connection, to use a variety of strategies and tactics to convey a consistent message in a variety of forms. And if you were listening earlier, you saw that there are a number of ways in which PR differs from all the other career paths, and many of them circle around the fact that PR is broad and PR is multifaceted. So there are a lot of different things that are connected here. And I like this little layout here where it says there are a few things that are summed up when we think of PR. It's global and multicultural, so it has to reach a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. It's research-based, relationship-focused, internet and new media oriented, and toolbox-driven tactics. It's got grit, basically. So there's your cheesy acronym for today, but I thought that applied well. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If you have questions or concerns, you know where to find me, and I will see you on the discussion board.